Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. There's a key idea which really struck me from today's conversation with Kirsten Dehlholm, which I haven't really been able to shake since we taped it. I haven't been able to fully think it through, but the basic concept has to do with truth in artistic representation and the raw materials you use as vehicles for your ideas. But perhaps it'd be easier for me to explain if I introduce you to Kirsten first. She's the founder and artistic director for a performance group called Hotel Pro Forma, who have been staging extravagant and spectacular performances for 30 years here in Denmark and abroad. As you'll hear in our talk, it isn't exactly theater, but it borrows many tools and vestments from theater. And this is the idea that struck me. Why make art about people in materials which are not people? Do you get me? There's so many sculptures, photographs, drawings, paintings of people. There's a novel idea in just going straight to the source, and I think Kirsten nailed this. Just use people. If you want to talk about people, use people. It doesn't have to be theater. It can be visual art. And performance art is usually so occupied with the self, it often forgets people on the whole, people as a group. Well, Kirsten didn't. And the results are pretty amazing. I'll leave her the rest to explain, but before I go, I will say this. Visual artists, if you are here in Copenhagen before the 29th of November, go see the Hotel Pro Forma show at GLstrand. It is different. The starting point it comes from is different, and it will bake your noodle. And if you're anything like me, it'll fill you with enough ideas to last a lifetime. I cannot stress this enough. But in the meantime, Kirsten Dehlholm, take it away. I can only imagine that you were interested in theater at a young age and then started getting involved with it. But where did you make the switch to Hotel Pro Forma? Where did you make that jump?
Well, I was not interested in theater at a young age.
Even better.
At all. Not at all. I hated theater. I always say,
were you forced to go and you didn't like it?
No, I wasn't forced to go, no. I saw a bit when I was young. I didn't live in Copenhagen. I lived in the province, in the middle of Denmark. I saw a few performances in the real theater, and yes, it was interesting, but I wasn't especially engaged at all. And when I was, in my 20s, I really, 30s and 40s, even 50s, I used to say I hate theater. And I go to very few theater performances. But what I really like is the red curtain. And here you have all the expectations.
Right.
But often I leave the piece in the break or even before. Well, that is because when you say theater, then you think of something, with a lot of text and characters and psychological narratives and all that. And that I was not interested in for many, many, many years. But
it's true that you get a very clear idea about what theater is when you say, oh, I went to a theater show to somebody. They think of a small theater. They think of rows of seats. They think of a stage of about a certain dimension and ratio, a little bit wider than it is deep, and people prancing in and out from behind and,
Exactly. Yeah. And often that is the kind of theater I really don't care about, not even today, not at all.
Yeah.
Because here they don't leave for me a space, for myself to interpret, to make interpretations or to imagine something, because everything is too given already from the stage. But when I started before Hotel Pro Forma. I started in 1977 with can say, my name was theater. In English, it would be Theater of Image Material. In Danish, it is Billedstofteater. Theater made up of image material.
And that's an education, or what is that exactly?
No, that was my group, you can say.
Oh, okay.
That was my you can say my company, or
okay.
I didn't have a company, but that was the name for what I did.
Okay.
And that was from 77 to 85, and we were 2 directors, and with a lot of other people around us.
But how did you get involved in something you didn't really enjoy?
But what I made was not theater in that sense, with the rows and the stage as you just talked about. Not at all. We completely avoided for almost 20 years. I avoided the stage. I was very much in museums. So with the Theater of Image Material, we made huge performances in museums.
Okay.
And other non-theater buildings or sites. I made many performances in the Glyptotek Museum. Several of them with many performers, like 120 performers. An audience was walking around, like in an exhibition, looking at the figurants, I call them. And these performances got very famous.
The figurants are the actors, the performers.
Yeah, because they're not acting at all. They're just being.
They're participants.
Yeah, but I call them figurants because they are like figures. So they mingled with, they had certain things to do in the museum, and they were no words, not speaking. So they were visual characters, you can call them. And audience walking around in all the spaces. And they were very popular, this kind of performance. So also I was in other places, not only museums, but like the public baths in Østerbro. But it was really like stage images. Moving images in a space.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with normal theater. But, so after 9 years with 28 productions, I started Hotel Pro Forma. And here, I didn't want the word theater in my name, so that is why it's Hotel Pro Forma. And I continued since 85. That means we are now 30 years old.
I'm really interested, though, in the point in which you decided to work in this medium you also kind of invented. As a person who was not particularly interested in theater, you were obviously interested in people and space and people as part of a performative event. Were you always interested in that part?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I was.
And you just looked at theater and said, "This is not the way to do this. This is not what's interesting to me."
Well, I didn't even look at theater. I mean, it was just not interesting for me.
Yeah,
the normal theater. It was, so I didn't even care about it. I mean, they did what they had to do. I did what I had to do.
It never figured.
And so there was no fight, you can say.
It's just interesting because, like, for instance, if I'm reading this newspaper, the word theater comes up often in the discussion about what you do. So it seems unavoidable in a sense. Even if you weren't interested, you still get pushed in that direction.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's interesting. They say theater because actually we don't call ourselves a theater. What we do is performance art.
Right.
And we do big productions. But you can play with it. Now I can better play with the word of theater.
Right.
Also because I have done performances with actors and with a narrative. But then I do it in a very visual or auditive way. And always the space is an important co-player.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm also changing my or I would say developing what I'm doing, and I do very many different things.
Were you interested in museums and art and I don't want to say two-dimensional, but whatever we imagine when we talk about museums and art, fine arts on that level?
Well, I just love museums.
Why?
They're like art temples, you can say.
Yeah. So that seemed like a much more interesting context to work in.
Yeah, it's a space, a place where you can walk around by yourself. As in theaters, also few people are there, or often few people. Often you may be alone.
Yeah.
In the museum, and you can stay as long as or as short as you want, and I would say it's a space for contemplation. Now, I mean, it was, because nowadays also all museums have to follow the trend. That means more people, events, this and that. And
audience development.
So audience development. So the space for contemplation is actually hard to find today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's the downside of the new requirements, which say that an audience, that a museum is only worth the visitor numbers.
Exactly.
That it has to be relevant to a greater public.
That's right.
Which is a tricky.
Yeah, very tricky.
It's a slippery slope, because it's also art is supposed to be a room for experimentation and.
Yeah. Well, still it is.
Sure, but it's a dangerous combination to try to do both.
Yeah,
of those.
I think so. But they also the museums have so many cuts, budget-wise, and they have to be visible. We all are fighting for the. We are all part of the competition to get audience.
Right,
it's true.
Right.
So, yeah,
a slice of the pie. How did this show happen? How did this become? I just read that you didn't normally celebrate birthdays for Hotel Pro Forma.
I just, for actually 30 years now, I've just been going on and on and on with our productions. We did like 40 big productions and several minor ones during these years. So I've just been very busy producing and creating. Mm-hmm. But now I thought, okay, this year I am 70 years old and Hotel Pro Forma is 30 years old, so let's celebrate. And I wish to show to the audience how many aspects, how many different kinds of things we've been doing during the years. I mean, just show a little bit of it. Give them a taste of it by making an exhibition and not making one performance. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're here in GLstrand.
So do you think it's different than the usual kind of, I mean, is this a unique exhibition for you guys?
It is absolutely a unique exhibition, yes. Because you have to stage it very differently than from a performance. In an exhibition, people come and go as they wish, stay short or long time, and they get very close to the works. Mm. So the finishing has to be very well made, and the works will be seen in another context. So all that I was conscious about. I didn't want to make just a retrospective. Mm-hmm. Because it sounds actually very, not so engaging. So we don't say anything about that. It's retrospective. Yeah. Actually, the exhibition is not only retrospective. There are many new works as well, together with fragments of the older productions. Mm. And the way these fragments meet each other, that also give new meetings and new contexts. And everything is made site-specific for the space of GLstrand. Mm.
What about the role of collaboration? Because I was looking, there's over 150 people involved with just this exhibition, is that right?
Yeah, just this exhibition. Because you expect something live when you think of Hotel Pro Forma.
Okay.
Hotel Pro Forma is known for its performances and not for exhibitions, even though we have made like 3 or 4 exhibitions before. But the performances are well known, so of course you do expect something live to happen. And I didn't really want, can we say, real performance. Now there are performances everywhere. But I decided to focus on the text that have been written to our productions through all the years by the best Danish and foreign writers and poets. Because we really have fantastic text. So I thought it would be a good idea to have them read aloud, read by living people, not just printed on paper. So there is a constant, non-stop reading performance with people who have written the text or people who have played the text and people who have, young people who have never been in a performance, Hotel Pro Forma performance before. Young people from some theater and film schools. So it is non-stop 128 hours long.
That's a lot.
And it really gives something that you know, it always does when you have a living a human being in front of you. Of course, it's different than if you don't have it. It gives another attention, another energy. People can come several times, and every time it's different.
Right, and that also means you can't control it to the 100%.
That's right. I cannot, because I don't have time to direct them. I only showed them, the new ones especially, how to read and talk, which is in my theater rather slow, and not too much acting, not at all.
Be yourself.
Yeah. Just let the words talk, because they are so wonderful. These words.
I found it really interesting. You touched on it right before about how there's so much performance, and of course that makes me think about performance art with a capital P that us in the fine art world are more used to, which is often one person, 2 people maybe. It's very much about the self. It's very personal. It's enactment of personal artistic vision, etc., etc. But clearly, you are not from what I know, you're not interested in that kind of performance. The role of self. You are the organizer of all this, but you seem just as willing to not be the center of the stage, of the viewer's gaze, whereas most traditional performance artists are. What do you think? I mean, do you think you're related to them or not related to them?
Well, I'm not really related to them, because what I choose to show is more, can we say, universal? I'm a very curious person, and I'm interested in so many things. I'm interested in the world. I call my performances investigations of the world, and that is on all levels. And I just want to show many different things, always involving human being, because we cannot avoid that. We are human beings, and we are part of the world. But I like to point at something outside of ourselves, but we need somebody to do it. We need you can say, a medium, which is then a human being. And I like I like what it does to you when you see and hear a child reading a grown-up text, or a grown-up person reading a text in her or his way, and then another one coming and he or she does it in her way or in his way. I mean, of course, the performance is influenced by who is doing it, but still there's a message. I wouldn't say a message really. Well, not in a normal. Well, kind of content. There's a content to give to the audience, and always necessary to leave enough space for the viewer, the listener, that he or she can imagine his own thoughts, he has his own reflections and associations. If I am a viewer myself, I want very much space for myself to think and sense what it means. And this is, of course, what I don't like so much about theater, and it's different with performance art made by visual artists. It's another genre, I would say.
I agree. Do you ever perform yourself?
I did, a lot.
No more?
No, I stopped. Sometime I stopped because I wanted to control. And you cannot control what's happening.
I think that's what I'm going for, is that the big difference between a performance artist and you is that you are building something and then setting it loose upon the world. Whereas a performance artist is acting something out, or performing something, or, however you want to define it. And that jumps into a different boundary.
Yeah.
It makes me think also that perhaps the thing you never liked about the theater was the so-called fourth wall.
Yeah.
That whole audience performance separation. And then eventually people started, breaking it down. But it seems like you never even contemplated working with that separation between audience and performance.
Well, I do also, because I have made huge performances for the big stage. And there you do have a seated audience in the big theater, like an opera theater. And what they see and hear on the stage, it is presented as, again, as an image with music, sounds, but there is a separation between the stage, a very clear separation between the stage and the audience. But this is one way of doing it. But I'm very conscious about where I am. So if I am a theater, I don't want to make theater. I want to make visual art with sound and music. And make it very clear that you look into a picture, which I could not create if I did not have the frame of the stage.
Right. The building is there.
Yeah, and the frame. It's a frame. I put a picture into the frame of the theater stage. But other performances do not have that and are conceived differently, have another concept, like a performance where I have the figurants, the participants are like figurants, walking around, standing or doing their things, and audience mingle with them. I wouldn't call it interactive, but audience is walking around like in an exhibition.
Yeah. Speaking of putting a picture in the frame.
And I'll just say that these two different kinds of performances, they also demand different things from me. That the performance in the piece on the stage, on the big stage, they need very much precision, extremely much precision, in order to be kind of metaphysic. And I'm there always. When we travel, I'm always traveling with the performances. I'm there to give notes to the performers so that each performance is as precise as it was conceived and created.
As true to the vision as possible.
Yeah. Whereas a performance in a space like here, Nikolai, for instance, where the performers were 50 performers were taking up the various spaces and doing different things, and audience was walking around for 3 hours. There, I do. I know that accidental things will happen. I don't have control. I cannot control, and I don't want either. So I let space for the uncontrollable, for the accident. That means the accidental meetings with the viewer and the performer. And so it's just completely different kinds of concepts. But still, it's not really what close to the performance art made by visual artists.
Right. But it's starting to look more like visual art to me. You even mentioned putting the picture in the frame.
Yeah.
Do you see it more in that sense?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I see myself as a visual artist. Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I was never trained in theater at all. I was trained in sculpture.
Okay. Okay, so that's really where it started, was building of objects in a way.
Yeah, I was actually trained as a textile artist. So I worked with textile materials for a long time, making big sculptures with textile materials.
This makes
but
sense.
This is like a century ago. It's like
right, and so performance or theatrical or I'm missing the words to talk about it, but these sort of exhibitions do require, they resemble sculptures. They're living sculptures in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense as a context. I mean, I'm so terribly old school in that I always want to contextualize everything. I really want to.
I think most people do, actually.
I guess it's natural, right? And it's okay to exist in these in-between lands, but you just want something to grab onto.
Yeah.
To contextualize it. And there's really no need for that, right? I mean, but it's natural.
No, it's natural. People ask, what does it mean? And they want, yeah. It's natural. We are looking for the sense. What does it mean? But I usually say if I work with actors, we don't start with psychology. We start with rules, formal rules about form and content, because psychology is there anyway. You cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid it. We are psychological creatures. But don't start with it.
Right. You're beating the horse to death if you just keep talking about that.
Yeah. And that is interesting. If you have if you then create your piece from sharp rules, then it happens that that the piece becomes even more psychological.
Right.
Because it just gets obvious. It gets it just gets more obvious for the audience.
Well, we're such a psychological society too. Everything is always talked about in terms of what it means and what it felt like. And, just watch advertising. It's the most psychological thing. They're just trying to manipulate our poor little monkey brains.
But then I ask, what does it mean to see a sunset?
It doesn't mean anything, and it means everything, right? I mean, right, and that starts creating, that breaks down these classifications, anyways.
Yeah.
And then you're just back where you started.
Yeah, I'm interested in science.
Yeah,
I'm really in science. You work surely with rules and intuition, but maybe you don't work so much with what does it mean.
Yeah, I was reading recently a really interesting book about how the physicists, the Western world's top physicists in the 60s and 70s loved taking acid, and they loved taking mushrooms and stuff because they were really trying to figure out like how much of this is personal psychology and how much of this is just straight scientific method.
Yeah.
And
how much is chemistry?
Yeah. How much is chemistry and how much is my own
Yeah.
predisposition to think this is true or not true.
Yeah.
And that's one of those areas where I think the difference between life, art, and science start to break down.
That's right.
And I don't know, I hope there are still some scientists out there taking psychedelic drugs, because I hope it, I would think it would help you think about a bigger picture with what you do in your work.
If they can get hold of it.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it is science or psychology or wherever.
Do you think the society is getting more restricted?
I wonder about that, and I was going to actually talk to you a little bit about your so-called dream imagery. I think we're becoming, I don't know about restricted, but I think we're becoming very much more literal. Everything is so literally true or untrue. This is a fact. This is not a fact. This is a fact. And I think there's a lot less space for multiple truths and conflicting truths.
Yeah.
Everything seems so categorized.
Is that capitalism?
It might be. I think in a way it's a survival instinct, because if we take in too much information or too many truths, it becomes hard to operate in a world in which we have to make decisions every second of our life. I've been thinking a lot about magic lately. And I heard another podcaster speak recently about truth that is truer than literal truth. He was talking about the Bible, how the Bible is not literal truth whatsoever, but there are truths in it which are truer than anything that can be written.
Yeah.
And that really struck me as something that we don't have a lot of now. We don't have a lot of this sort of, well, it's this way and that way at the same time. The Latin American idea of dualism,
Yeah.
There's, I think more that's what we're missing, and I see that in your work. This kind of more dreamy, visual-based truth, untruth at the same time.
There's a lot of duality.
What about you? Do you think we're becoming that way?
Yeah, I think we're becoming more restricted. Our society has become more restricted. I think so.
What's your examples of that?
Well, it's just it's funny. I don't think much about capitalism because I'm not very political. But it's funny that I think this is the first time ever I said that. But I was just thinking, maybe it is the effect of capitalism, that everything has to be counted and seen as numbers.
I mean, the computerization, digitalization of everything is binary, 0 or 1.
Yeah.
Yes, no, isn't.
But on the other hand, when you say that, I also do believe that, or a sense that the enormous the computer, the whole digital world has also freed us from some parts of the capitalism. So it's duality. There is a duality, actually.
Exactly, and that's more maybe what we need to embrace.
And I think because of the digital world, many more people are able to contact each other who never could do that before. And the networking is enormous.
What we're doing right now would not exist without
internet
culture and digital world.
And that is a positive thing. That because many people act against capitalism through networking, through inventing new ways of organizing.
Yeah. And
especially now, like, I mean, I just read about the young Spanish people who don't have work, who cannot find work. They find each other, trying to do, of course, to organize new. Can we say, new ways of acting out?
Community.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe that's where the frontier, we've given up in the public space.
Yeah, that's right.
That some of the freedoms, or at least we've become used to having less of them, but we have moved the fight over to our online world. Because, the certain robber barons and powers that be do want the internet to be more streamlined and more yes, no, restrictive, capitalistic. And that's where we're fighting now for these freedoms and the chaos, really. Because if you talk about the internet, you also have to accept, if it's so Wild West, then you also have to accept the bad side.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really evil shit that goes on there too.
Of course, yeah. But there's a lot of things you cannot control because of the internet. I mean, the way the whole communication is running, it can be so surprising. Mm. And things are... The way we communicate with each other is something that is completely uncontrollable for somebody like me and like all of us, which is a good thing. Well, of course, good and bad, but I see it very positive.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be, bitter and how it was better before in the old days or something. Not at all, because there you had other problems. Of course, there you had at least in Denmark, you had a much stronger class society with the rich and the poor. We don't have that in Denmark. Other countries, yes, surely, but not really in Denmark.
Here it's bad to be rich.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They are often disrespected.
Yeah.
And, although that's changing. There is a Americanization of standards and dreams, I would say.
But here we get a new poor class, which, of course, are the refugees.
Yeah. Immigration.
Yeah.
And they are not treated very nicely at all. That's true.
So terrible. No.
But do you see any of this reflected in your work? Do you see all of this reflected in your work?
Not that side, I think so.
That's more of a personal thing?
Yeah, it is.
Well, what about the visual aspect? Because it is so dreamy and so... I'm such a visual person, so I was so struck by all the images. I've never seen a performance of you guys, but I've seen quite a few images of it, and it's so rich and beautiful and so inviting. I want to walk into it and I want to touch it and I want to, it just immediately draws me in, and that's some of my favorite kind of art. I mean, I'm personally just a flat 2-dimensional artist myself, but yeah, I just wanted to walk into it, and what do you feel about this? About the strong preference you guys have to working visually?
Well, this is the way I work.
It just
this
goes
is the
back
way I
to
see and sense. So this is my language. And it's always created in collaboration with other visual artists and video designers and light designer, especially one light designer. I collaborate a lot with other artists and designers, and but in the end, I'm the one to choose. But it's just the way I see things. And somehow it becomes very beautiful. Not that I'm sometimes trying to make now I'm trying to make something ugly. It's very difficult.
Just to mess something up, make it not
because
super
beauty
big.
is, for me, enigmatic.
Sure.
It's a true enigma. And I suppose you just have a sense of what is beautiful and what is scaled in the right way. And not that it's classical scaled, because I like when there crashes between low and high art, between something very fine art and something very daily. So the context, the meetings are often, you see that very much in Hotel Pro Forma productions. And you will see it here also in the exhibition.
The clash.
Yeah, you'll see objects like from everyday life together with something, with other elements. Because we are, it all belongs to the world, to this very enigmatic, beautiful, classical kind of things, and our just normal daily cups and saucer and hairdryer and whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, I find it, of course, very engaging as a visual artist. But, I mean, obviously since you think in that sense, this is probably, it's a dumb question, which I think might lead to a good answer. Why not just be a photographer or a sculptor or something that's more just simply visual based? Why involve people? Why involve audience on that level?
Yeah, it's a good question. That might be easier. And might be less expensive. Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by people.
Yeah.
I truly am. I often said to myself, now I should do something without people, and then it happens, there will be at least one person.
They show up.
Yeah. In my picture.
Yeah.
I suppose I think we all are, as human beings. We all are interested in human beings. I remember the photographer Mads Gamdrup.
Mm-hmm.
He said he didn't want to have any humans in his photography, because then you only look at that. And it's true. I remember one of his landscape pictures, photos, huge photo from the mountains covered with snow. There was one tiny, tiny little man standing somewhere in the middle, or not middle, but somewhere in this picture. And the first thing I look at him is this man. I cannot help it. We do that. We are just bloody interested in each other, if we are not too much interested in ourselves.
Well, we see ourselves in others, I imagine, too.
Yeah, we do. We mirror ourselves, we reflect ourselves, and communication can be very wonderful, and very difficult also. So what just, as Warhol did. He just placed some people along the wall and say, please look at them. And they were just standing there. And it's wonderful to give the possibility just to look at human beings and imagine how and what they are and what so on. Everyone has something to give. I just had just now, this week, 2 days ago, I was in Stockholm, where I'm going to restage a performance we did called Cosmos. It has 2 kids in the performance and some adults, and we had audition to find the right boy and girl. And you know how audition is. We do it. We did this single by single. So every time the door opened, you're curious: who is coming in? What will he do? What does he look like, or what does he radiate?
Yeah.
It was so interesting. Even though we had many, we had 9 boys and 13 girls the first day, and the second day we had another 8 girls. More of the girls like to go to do these kind of things. And even though it was a lot, it was just so interesting. And you have to, and there, it's also difficult because you have to judge, and they all come with expectations, and they're nervous, and
the pressure.
And yes, pressure, and then but they all come with their own personality, and that is what we are. We are a lot of individual personalities, and we have so much content.
Yeah, it just seems like such a genius move in a way, because so many artists make art about people, but they only think about themselves, really. And instead, you just brought people in to make the art, to involve, to bring all the chaos and the radiation, like you just mentioned, all that stuff. Just bring the people in. You don't have to make a painting about them, obviously your own medium is your own medium, but it just seems like in retrospect, it's so easy, right? You just bring them in and see what happens.
Yeah, I bring them into the picture. They are part of the picture, and they are staged. They have to do certain things, act in a certain way, in order to be part of the picture, to be part of the content.
But they are themselves, like you said earlier. They're never you.
That's right. They're themselves, but they're also somebody else. They are part of the performance. They're not playing themselves, or they're not. I said to one actor, "Don't act. You kind of be yourself." "Oh, that's impossible. I'm always acting." Of course he is. When he is on the stage, you are acting.
That's all he's been trained to do.
Even though, if you're part of a performance, it's not a natural way. It's an artificial way, and you have to act like that. You have to put it on as a coat, and be part of this artificiality, which I love. He taught me something, this actor. He's a very good actor. But when I say don't act, of course I mean don't overact. Because then I don't believe.
Right. Well, I mean, if I do something where all of a sudden 30 people are watching me, I am no longer myself.
Of course you're not.
I'm myself being watched by 30 people.
That's right.
Which is such a strange thing that happens to us.
Yeah, of course.
Especially since we love to watch other people.
Yeah. We're different now because we're sitting opposite each other than if we are alone in our own space, of course. Not that we're acting, but we are trying to communicate.
Right. Well, there's such social contract too. Like we agree that this is how conversations go. And
it's also interesting when you meet somebody and there's this absolutely clear distance between you. When you're standing, if you're not lovers, then you have a certain distance. And I think you can measure it complete on centimeter, how far or how close you will be. We're a little bit far because we have a table between us. But if we were standing opposite each other, we would know that this is exactly the distance between us we should have in order to communicate, in order not to be enemies or being too far from each other. We know that.
And it changes from culture to culture.
Exactly, it does.
I hear that about people who go to China, is that everyone stands uncomfortably close to what we're used to.
Yeah, that's what I heard also. And also in Africa, they were closer.
Which is hilarious because just that simple 20 centimeters difference means, oh my God, I'm on high alert, I'm uncomfortable, what's going on?
Yeah.
Or, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Which just shows what psychological beings we are, again, like you pointed to earlier.
Yesterday in the conference, it ended by a small conversation between two other people and me. And it can be a little bit boring, these kind of conversations, but I brought 5 chairs, different heights, a very small, low chair, a very high chair, and another high chair, and 2 normal ones. And during our little conversation, I asked them to change chairs. And of course, you speak differently from a small chair to somebody sitting up on a high chair.
Right.
It was just fun. We did it for fun, but it gives a lot of psychology.
Right, it's the difference between being a child and an adult. Right? You're sitting in the small chair looking up. You're looking at mommy and daddy in some weird part of your brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good news, is there's enough to work with for this lifetime and many others.
That's right.
There's plenty to grab onto.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, you mentioned earlier, we had you were talking about, is life more restrictive now? Are we more limited? Do you see that in the art world too?
No, not at all. No, in the art world it's very varied, with lots of variations, and it's very transdisciplinary.
It's opening up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Visual art is my inspiration. Film, architecture, and visual art is still my inspiration. I see very little theater, actually.
Yeah.
I see more than before, but not very much, not as much. I really am very updated on visual art, film, and architecture. And I think it's wonderful how the visual artists, they're using all kinds of media and materials and performative elements. And no, I think it's very rich.
I'm very happy now that there seems to be different levels building now in the art world too. That there isn't just the blue chip artists, the Jeff Koons and the Warhols, and there isn't just that level. There are you can now exist on many different levels as a creative person, and I think that opens it up a lot too. Which is, you don't have to, because certain levels have certain other things involved.
Yeah.
Networking, for example, that whole game. Who knows who, that whole world. You don't necessarily have to play that game anymore. And I feel like maybe once you did, if you wanted to work as a creative person.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the networking and the
we are people.
Yeah.
It does come back to that always, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's good to hear is that maybe the art world is opening up and there is...
Oh, yeah, I think so. Very much so.
Also more collaboration between fields which weren't traditionally associated with art.
Yeah.
Anthropology.
Oh, yeah.
Science.
Yeah.
Which is great. We need more people from more backgrounds working
absolutely
on different levels.
Yeah. And a physicist an astrophysicist, he came to me with these amazing, fantastic pictures from the universe, from cosmos, some years ago. And that actually finally made this performance called Cosmos. And he was so longing for working, not as an artist himself, but collaborating with artists, because he was so enthusiastic about what he knew and what he sees, what he knows about the universe. He wanted to share.
Right.
So we made this performance called Cosmos, even for children and adults.
Yeah.
And it was a very big success because we're not trying to talk down. We don't. You cannot make quantum physics easy.
Not for me, at least.
No. So the text is what it is, and it is as difficult for children as for the adults.
Right.
But then it had a good lot of fantastic images.
Right. And so you can communicate it with your own visual language in a way that he probably couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have... did you learn anything from this exhibition? From doing it differently this time around?
Yeah.
I know it's early. You just opened a week ago.
I did open a week ago. I'm still learning it. I'm still learning or getting acquainted with it, I would say. And I really tried to make installations, fragments from performances as installations that keep as visual art installation. So that was my how to say that? That was my assignment to find the fragments and the objects and to install them so that they also become visual art objects, which is different than scenography.
It has to last.
Yeah.
It's not just a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Scenography is not art. But maybe some part of my scenography is art. And that is what I'm learning.
What you were digging up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess the final question is the worst one, as always. What is art for? For you. It's obviously a personal question.
To make a difference. To see and sense the world in not rational ways.
To go away from this literal world we live in.
That's right.
To bring the dreams back.
Well, I'm very careful to use the word dreams. And I don't use the word vision either. But the idea is to expand the personal universe and the human universe. I think a world without art would be very poor. I wouldn't want to live in that world.
I don't think it can exist.
No, I believe not.
It may not fundamentally be possible.
No, you're right. I think you're right. I think it's like breathing for human beings.
Yeah. The human universe. That's perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by David Hyde. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our performance troupe of a website, undergang.net. This show is produced in part with the kind support of the Danish Arts Council. Thank you for joining us. It's been 2 years now. Ever onwards, ever upwards.